Why, hello YouTube! Greetings from the LazyEyebrowReviewer to the review of Combiner Wars First Aid. First Aid is a retool of Combiner Wars Off-Road. So again, another figure that was thrown in for the sake of new character for a different Gestalt whose design was actually for something else entirely. Regardless, First Aid has quite the snazzy looking alt mode. It's an ambulance, but it's the kind that looks rugged, like something you'd see out in the Australian outback that needs to get somewhere because somehow they got wind that somebody was dying in the middle of the desert. Anyway, off topic, let's talk First Aid himself. First Aid was once a super bland paint-wise vehicle, but repro labels from ToyHacks.com really did wonders for this figure, and since I have two First Aids for a reason that I'll explain later, I can show a comparison. On the front and sides, ToyHacks adds little bits here and there that help, but that rear end, oh man, does this ever highlight how far the ball was dropped in the paint department. Just look at this unfinished white that just slathers itself all over the rear on the left vehicle. ToyHacks. I mean, what they did here. Just epic. Now, he does come with an accessory. Well, technically two, but it's a weapon that stupidly sides mounts for people who like to whine about weapon storage. It is the handfoot, and where off-road could rock it out like some canopy engine type thing, it looks pretty stupid in First Aid's vehicle mode. So off it comes and we'll talk limbs. First off, a leg. Stand the thing in its rear end, rotate the front down, and make sure the plug is up. The end. Probably the easiest of all the Combiner Wars legs. Arm mode though. Pull out the arms, open, unfold, and close up the legs, and attach the arms to the sides of the cab. And here we have the messiest looking arm out of the entire Combiner Wars series. Considering I never put off-road as an arm the entire 2 days I owned Venusaur, this is a bit of a shock to me of how much of a hodgepodge of parts First Aid turns out to be as an arm. The forearm looks alright, although I find it a bit gappy and chunk missing in some parts. But that bicep, I mean, what in the world happened? You got a plate here, with front end there, with door panel here, random bits of truck there, that all kinda haphazardly peg in together for no real rhyme or reason other than the fact that it needs to be a solid cohesive chunk. And they failed. So here's the best they could do on a day's design. This reason alone is why I bought a second First Aid. Because to fix this, I highly recommend you do not attempt unless you have spare parts or a spare figure. So, the first thing I tried to do to fix this was remove the forearms, just to see what would happen, much like I did to the helicopter molds. However, for whatever reason, these elbow joints are made of a far more brittle plastic than the helicopters, and have way less give. And on the first arm, I broke the elbow joint clean off. Like, there was no little bit of crack, it just broke. So, that's when I grabbed a second one from Toys R Us since they had like 3 there. And it's the one you see in the majority of the review. This spare First Aid though, I figured I was in that far, I may as well have finished the job. So I snapped off the other elbow joint. I then glued the forearms to the rear of the truck and ground away the arms so that the legs could have a little bit of clearance while in arm mode. So, pros and cons of doing this. Well, for one, the forearm ends up looking like a solid chunk, without parts being missing and looking all weird. It looks fantastic. And most importantly, the bicep, since there's no little arm to get in the way, gets to have the doors put back into position so that it too looks like a solid, cohesive chunk. The cons to this. Well, you would end up losing 50% of your figure. You can write off vehicle mode altogether. The glued-in arms, unless you grind away a ton of the arm, impede the movement of First Aid's legs to go back and forth between modes. And because they're glued in down there, First Aid does look like an amputee victim. So this brings on the need for the second First Aid. This one looks fantastic in vehicle, leg, and robot modes. So since he gets all of that, this other one gets to be a phenomenal Defensor arm. Anyway, to go to robot mode, you split the legs, bring the arms down, and flip up the head. And here we have First Aid, looking quite fantastic, and faithful to the original cartoon and comic books, with the red chest and thighs. Ah yes, the weapon. He too gets an axe. This, I think, suits First Aid way more. With off-road, I was like, why? This guy makes me think,
Help! Help! I've got this huge pipe stuck on me! Help me!
don't worry, I'll get you out of there. Now stand back. I'm going to bust through this wall. For size comparison, Combiner Wars Quickslinger, Unit Class Orations Frankenseeker, and MPB, because everything scales well with MPB. So let's spin my review for Combiner Wars First Aid. He's a great figure, but sadly does not work all too well as an arm. Ironic considering that's what he generally is regarded as being when Defensor isn't in his Scramble City mode. This has been the Lazy Eyebrow Reviewer.